Welcome to Lakers Central, the pregame show. Guys, I always forget to say this because I think it's pretty straightforward, but make sure you subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our pre and post game shows or any of the other videos or content that we post to YouTube. Happy New Year's Day to everybody out there. Hope you had a wonderful and safe night. Vinay, how are you celebrating the kickoff to the new year?
I'm celebrating it like every other dad probably is celebrating it. Like it's every other old day, New Year's, Christmas. It doesn't matter. They're usually the ones occupying all your time unless you've got work. And so, I just went to the park a little bit earlier. It was nice. Let my daughter kind of like run around and stuff like that. And we sat on a swing for like 15 minutes. So it was good. But I also want to say Happy New Year's to you, Alex. Happy New Year's to all the folks who end up listening in, either live or a little bit later before the game. I am keeping my fingers crossed that we have a much better 2021. I hope everybody does, getting past the pandemic and all that sort of stuff, and people's jobs and businesses and everything can recover. But I'm just being positive as always, and looking forward to the new year, and looking forward to tonight's Laker game. A In our baseball style series, we get to play the Spurs again. So I'm going to be very interested to see if Greg Popovich or Becky Hammond, whichever one decides to coach tonight, decides what adjustments they make, and if the Lakers make any adjustments themselves.
2020 was certainly one of the worst years of my adult life. Probably the same for many folks out there. The one of the bright spots is that the Lakers did win the NBA championship for the first time in a decade. So
Mm-hmm.
that was an amazing feeling, I know, for me and for you and for millions of Lakers fans out there. And so at least in 2021, we are hoping the Lakers bring that good luck into this year. But speaking of those baseball style series that we're kind of facing for the first time, and I think fans are getting used to, I had someone message me and ask me like what was up with us playing the Spurs so much. So guys, if you don't know what's kind of going on, the league has only released half of its schedule at this point. We don't even know what the back end of the schedule is going to look like. And so what they're doing is they're having these teams play kind of these baseball series where they're playing back to backs, or they're playing the same team a couple times in a few days. One, to cut down on travel, mainly because we're still dealing with a pandemic. And so for Lakers fans who may be very tired of seeing the Lakers play boring old San Antonio, get used to it, guys, because this is the second time in 3 days. And then we played the Grizzlies in back-to-back games, and then we're back with San Antonio. They come to Staples, but we're back playing them again. And then we got the Bulls for back-to-back games. So it's going to be a very, very different year. And so it's interesting, right, Vinay, because usually, you might have a back-to-back against the same team. Sometimes you go a home and home against the same team, but we haven't played the same team basically 3 times in like 5 days in a really long time, maybe ever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about in my basketball watching days, but
No, I
what do
don't.
you?
I don't think we've ever seen something like that where we play a team that many times, unless it's like a makeup game from a game that was prior. But even then, that
Right.
that usually doesn't happen.
Do you think there are any benefits to this on the Laker side of things, seeing some of these teams, over and over in a short amount of time?
Yeah. So this I feel like this season has been very, very strange, obviously because of the pandemic and how it's affecting the schedules. But I don't know if there's really any advantages that come out of these baseball style series. The way that you can kind of think about it is that these are all like mini playoff series.
Hmm.
And yes, Happy New Year's to you. I
Hey,
think that's
Dan.
Dan the Laker fan,
That's
right?
Dan.
Is that
Yep.
Yeah? All right. Happy New Year's to you, Dan. Um, but yeah, as I was saying, like these are like little mini playoff style series, and for the Lakers, the funny part is that the regular season doesn't have that sort of level of intensity and stuff like that. So they're not probably going into this situation or these games. As we talked about, Raj mentioned it on the pregame, and then Jason mentioned it in the postgame. Like
Hmm.
the Lakers are health and chemistry, health and chemistry. That's going to be the theme of this team through the regular season. But some of these teams, they know they're going to play us 3 times in the next week, 7 days, and for them, they'll take it seriously. So the way that the Lakers prepare for some of these series will be very interesting. Frank Vogel typically doesn't do too many different changes. because if it's not broke, he's not going to try and fix it until it actually becomes a problem. So I don't know if there's any advantages, but I think there will be a lot of situations like maybe tonight where a team like the Spurs will make small adjustments to see if they can mess up whatever it is that the Lakers are doing with their lineups. So it'll be just curious to see, like how things adjust and stuff like that. But I will say this: I think these sort of series are resulting in really strange blowouts. Like we're getting these really crazy blowouts and stuff like that because a team will go in, like the Bucks will go in and say, "All right, this is how we're going to play the Heat this game." And then they'll blow out the Heat by people show up and they'll be like, we don't really care. Obviously they want to try and win, but they're not playing probably with the same seriousness that they did the first time around. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this sort of works out in the long term. But I think it could lead to very, very strange regular season records. I think we may think that some teams are closer when they're actually not. And we may see some teams that just kind of run the same formula over and over again, and they're winning a bunch of regular season games, but no, like teams are just watching, they're just scouting, and they'll wait till the playoffs to like unveil what it is that they're going to do. So it's interesting, man. This is the first time, the whole bubble situation was very unique for last season, and this season, like these baseball style series will be the first time we've seen something like that. And I don't even think I think you mentioned at the top of the stream that like they've only released half the schedule. I don't even know if they've done that. I think they've only received like the first quarter of the schedule.
Is it
so we don't even know.
Quarter?
Like, yeah, I thought it was like I think it's either 4 chunks of the schedule or it's 3 chunks of the schedule. And the reason why they're doing that is because they're hoping that at some point they can start allowing more and more fans into the arenas, so that they may move away from the baseball style series. But it's weird just how you prepare game to game and how you scout. So, like in the Lakers' case, they may just do whatever they do, and they don't really care about the win-loss record because they know that health is the most important thing. So, it'll be interesting. But I will say, this is an early pregame. It doesn't look like anybody other than Caruso is not going to play. But I won't be surprised if the Lakers drop some of these games just off the strength of the other team made a small adjustment and the Lakers just kind of kept going through the motions. Does that mean that they're not a serious team? Probably not. It means that they'll probably continue to be like a top 10 team or a top 5 team on offense and defense. But I wouldn't take too much stock out of it. But I'll be curious to see what ends up happening.
Yeah, I don't think the way that the games are being played right now, the kind of baseball series, I don't think that the Lakers have any kind of advantage with that. Like if there is an advantage, it's way too early to tell. I think that it probably changes whatever their sitting schedule is for how they're going to manage LeBron and Anthony Davis resting games. I mean, Adam Silver in the league has already made it clear that you better not rest a superstar on a national televised game, right? So there's already that. The Lakers, even when they're bad, are on TV a whole lot, and now coming off of a championship, they're on the TV. They're on TV the most this year on national televised games. So that's going to be that's interesting.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're gonna be the only ones that we're gonna be the only fan base where everybody's going to it's gonna be panic time every time we lose a game. If we drop a game to the Spurs or we come out flat against the Blazers, it'll be like, oh my gosh, But I think most Laker fans are pretty smart. Even the subsection of LeBron fans that watch the games, they're very astute too as well. They'll turn around and they'll just say, look, we've seen LeBron, this is what he does during the regular season. And personally for me, after last season, I'm like, all right, I'm not stressing any of this. I know there's been a lot of conversation about Anthony Davis and is he coasting? Maybe he may coasting and stuff like that. But I think as the season wanes on, they'll start turning it up a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder if, as the Lakers decide when they're going to sit Anthony Davis or LeBron James, I wonder if they'll ever opt to sit one. For example, when they play a San Antonio, would they opt to sit LeBron the first game and then AD the second game, or vice versa? Because now you're going to go into later on in the year where they may play the Clippers back-to-back or the Bucks back-to-back. And you're certainly not going to rest Anthony Davis and LeBron James during those kinds of games, right? Or against the Heat or the Nets. So I wonder if it changes how they rest guys in terms of that. But it's just so early to tell how this kind of these baseball series are going to work out. And I've had people messaging me and saying the Lakers have looked sloppy, and they have looked sloppy. But I've tried to remind people that it's literally the shortest offseason of any national champion we've had. I think in all North American sports. Like there's no one's had such a quick turnaround. Not to mention we're still dealing with a pandemic. And when you're dealing with the pandemic, you can't get into your normal routines. And for these older guys, routine is probably more important than say these younger guys that can kind of just run in the gym and hoop for 2 hours. But these older guys like LeBron, Marc Gasol, like it's different for those guys. And so, and then the Lakers, I think they would look better if they were running back basically the same team as they did last year. But they've implemented major new guys, right? Mark, Trez, Dennis, Wes, like all these guys are new. And so trying to implement new guys, and I don't know what the restrictions look like there in California. You would know better than I do, but I'm sure they're tight. And then having to go into different states that have their own set of restrictions on how you can practice and who can be where. It's just, I think things are going to be really interesting to start this season, especially for the Lakers, who I think know, as you and I talk about almost every day, their margin of error is so wide right now, is so large. They know that.
Yeah, their in-game margin of error, especially with like how well Dennis Schroder has played just kind of through these first 6 games. And I would say like the biggest positive from these first this will be our 6th game coming up, but like after and I know we're gonna do a recap eventually of that like first 10th of the season or whatever. But he's looked so good through these first 5 games, and there have definitely been moments where like the entire Laker team has struggled to score, like whether it's because somebody's just missing shots, like we're missing a bunch of easy shots at the rim and stuff like that, or whatever it may be. His steady scoring presence in those situations, I think he did against the Spurs. He even did against the loss against the Blazers, where he just kept going to the rim, getting easy buckets. It's been a very big difference for this Lakers team, and I think our star guys are also very, very aware of it. They've been. I know a talking point after the last game, a question that we got was like, is Anthony Davis kind of taking it easy, or is he not trying too hard, or is should we be concerned about him not taking as many shots or not going to the rim and stuff like that? And my response was like, look, I'm okay with this. Like if Dennis Schroder is taking as many shots as Anthony Davis and we're winning games by double digits, it's fine. I think when the time comes, Dennis Schroeder is going to know like who the big dogs on this roster are, and he's going to work through them. But for the course of this regular season, considering he's still working on that extension with the Lakers, we're okay with that. If anything, he's kind of shown up to be like a bona fide, I don't want to say third star, because that makes, that obviously Anthony Davis and LeBron are like top 3, top 4 players in the NBA. So they're like not even stars. They're whatever is beyond that, superstars, elite players. But Schroeder is most definitely a star in the sense of like the role that he's being asked to play and how he's playing. So it's just good. And I actually think that Anthony Davis and LeBron are like very malleable players. They understand how they can kind of focus and what they can do around the other guys that are doing well. So if we get a game where Kuzma's just lighting it up, you won't see them try to break up whatever synergy is going on, right? Like if Dennis Schroeder is going off because he's just getting layups at the rim, because whenever they run pick and roll, the big and the guard are worried about Anthony Davis getting a shot off, then Anthony Davis could be like, all right, that's cool, man. Just keep taking wide open layups. There's nothing wrong with that. And nobody, assuming that Schroeder gets this thing, that nobody here is playing for a contract. And when you don't have to do that, you can just play basketball. The stats won't matter. Only the wins matter. So it's. I think they'll all be good. I know that offensive synergy is something that they need to definitely work on, because the existing Laker players are not used to playing with the offensive talent that we have on this team this year, and that does require an adjustment period, because you just don't know. Last season we knew, all right, we can't give the ball to Dwight in the post and expect him to, score 5-6 times in isolation or down low in the post. But now we have a guy like Montrez where we can literally give the ball to him in isolation, and he may hit a couple jump shots or draw a couple fouls and all that kind of stuff. And, of course, we already know defense is something that takes an entire season to kind of figure out on who you have. So I think these are all good learning things, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of folks are doing a good job kind of focusing in on the small things that the Lakers are constantly improving on. But I would say, like, of anything that we've seen so far, I'm really happy with just how good Dennis, or how well Dennis has kind of fit in. Outside of maybe a couple of, like, stretches where he gets really, really careless with his turnovers and stuff like that. I feel like the only thing that he has left is to figure out how to throw an entry pass to Anthony Davis. Once he figures that part out, I feel like we'll be good to go.
Yeah, he's missed some of those, like those spin lobs that AD and Rondo used to connect on. That's not there yet, but that's a timing issue. Generally, when you're as good as Anthony Davis and you're as good as Dennis Schroder, you figure that out at some point. And so I wanted to bring Dan back in here because he asked, who has been the biggest surprise for you guys this season on the Lakers, and I don't know. I mean, I guess it's been Schroder for you. I don't know. You can certainly answer for yourself. I think for me, it's probably been Schroder. I think I said the last time we did a post game, I knew Schroder was good, and there was some question as to if he could keep up the kind of production he was doing at OKC on this Lakers team. I think he's been better, and it's a short season so far, but he's been every bit as advertised so far, and he's added an extra dimension that the Lakers haven't had. I've seen the jokes and the memes about Schroeder is what we thought Ramon Sessions would be at almost a decade ago. I've made the point that I don't think the Lakers have had a guard this good, a scoring guard since Nick Van Exel. I literally think it's been since like 97, 98 since they've had a guard like this. But is he the biggest surprise for you so far for the Lakers?
Yeah, I would say he probably is. I'm trying to think of any of the new guys. Like, I knew Mark would be a great passer for them. I knew Montrez would do what Montrez does. That's just kind of his. But I would say, like, how quickly Dennis is kind of integrated with him within the offense and stuff like that, both as an off-ball scorer and, like, some of that, the last game and then the game, a couple of games before that, he's run pick and roll with Anthony Davis. And there's been some, like, natural synergy there that I'm very, like, impressed by, because pick and roll with going from, like, Montrez pick and rolls to Anthony Davis pick and rolls. He's even run some pick and roll with LeBron a couple times too before, some with Marc Gasol. So, like, him figuring that part out has been a really nice surprise. And so I'm really happy to see that. And then I see a comment in there based on what we said before. Mimi mentioned that LeBron and AD are the most unselfish duo in the league. I agree. Like, I think they look at this team and they go, these guys are all here to help us win a championship. Right now LeBron is in legend in the legend arc of his career, right? He's just adding more and more accolades. So for him, the MVP is great, but it really doesn't matter. He's trying to get to that illustrious number 6 championship. So then that way, it's a different kind of legacy thing. Same thing for Anthony Davis. He's got the championship. He's got the contract. All that stuff is off of his, like, all that pressure's off of his shoulders. So now it's just about winning, like, and not winning in the regular season. It's about winning in the playoffs. And yep. I think Mimi's absolutely right. They're an unselfish duo, and I think that's the way they approach these games. So when we see games where Anthony Davis we think he looks passive because he's not, like, wrestling dudes down low in the paint and stuff like that for position, and he's just letting Dennis Schroder do what he does. I think he's just doing that because he wants him to get acclimated. He wants him to understand that this is what we want. We want you to feel comfortable. We see you as being part of the long haul here when it comes to this sort of stuff. So, but to answer your original question, yeah, I think Dennis is probably has been the biggest surprise. He's making some crazy shots. Like, forget, like, the catch and shoot threes and stuff like that he's doing. Like, some of these layups that he's taking and these, like, soft floaters that he lets off when he's like kind of navigating through the paint are like, they seem like really ridiculous shots. The stuff that he hits when he's, like, falling out of bounds, especially when he goes baseline and stuff. Like, we haven't seen, like, that sort of, like, I mean, when was the last time we saw guys, like, making shots like that? Like, some of the difficulty of his shots. So I think it's great. His speed is teams are not ready for his speed. If he gets a switch on a big, he knows he's getting to the rim, and there's nobody that's going to be able to stop him. And I'm very happy with his decision making. I think probably the only thing that if I had anything to complain about is just sometimes he has some really careless turnovers that you wouldn't expect. But I would say, like, 95% of his game so far has been positive. So I really have nothing serious to complain about.
Yeah, I don't either. I think he's been great. Like, if we had to go into this season with the point guard rotation we had last year, like admittedly I haven't. I've watched a little bit of Atlanta because I want to see what Trae Young looks like this year,
Yeah.
but I haven't paid attention to Rondo at all. So I have no idea if he's even playing right now or what the situation is. But
Yeah. So I've caught a couple of their games just because I've been trying to catch other stuff and expand my writing and stuff like that. So Rondo's been good. So Rondo fits with that team because of the way they run their offense. They need a singular guy. They have a bunch of young guys around them that don't really know how to run an offense unless there's like a guy like Rondo directing him. So he's been good for them. For the Lakers, we didn't need that because we had guys that were smart enough to cut and score and all that sort of stuff. So he's been good for Atlanta, at least from from a record standpoint and stuff like that. He's teams that they would normally lose to, like a team like Detroit and stuff like that, because their bench couldn't get it together or their team couldn't get it together when Trae Young was off the floor. He's helping them. And so it's a good investment for Atlanta from that standpoint. They're playing the Nets again today, so I'm going to watch that game too as well, because that team. I'll say this: if you haven't watched the Hawks, that team is not afraid of anybody. Like, they're not afraid to go to score on anyone, and they're certainly not afraid of the Nets either. So that should be a fun game to watch.
You love me 3, or you love me. Shout out to you love me. He said Dennis has been Iverson like, and I would say that Dennis has been Iverson light. But AI in his prime, AI at 6 feet. I mean, he could jump. I mean, he might have been the fastest guy in the league in his prime. So it's hard to compare anybody to Allen Iverson. He was like 165 and was just dominant. So AI being from Virginia, not too far from where I live, I'm not gonna say
you have some regional bias. No,
yeah.
but I understand the comp. I watched Iverson too, growing up and stuff like that. There was a time, there was the golden era of shooting guards, where it was Kobe, Iverson, McGrady, Vince Carter, Ray Allen. There's a lot of really. That's when like finding a top tier shooting guard was like, that was more important than any other position that you had on your team. And obviously now that's sort of changed. Because of the wave of analytics and just kind of how teams look at it, but find the evolution of players and skills, obviously. But I would say I get that. I can see the Iverson comp in terms of like when they let him just go ISO every single play, and because of Dennis's size, he's not like a tall guy or a burly style player. He's built a little bit more like Rondo, maybe not as like sort of rugged as Rondo is, but much more nimble. So I could see that. And there are times, man, where he just kind of gets the ball and he just kind of does his thing and the Lakers just play around him. And I think as the season goes on, when he goes into that mode where he just keeps scoring and scoring and scoring, and that's something that he did with OKC, the Lakers will figure out exactly kind of how to structure the right lineups around Schroder so that he can kind of carry it. And we've seen that, like, when he's scoring, guys like Anthony Davis, all they have to do is just play defense. Like they don't have to stress the offensive end, and that's a way of load managing while you're on the floor. Same thing for LeBron. If Wes Matthews is hitting all of his shots, or Montrez is scoring really well, or Kuzma, or whoever it is, it's a form of load management. They're on the floor, but the 30 minutes that they're spending on the floor, maybe only 20 minutes of that time is them actively trying to do something to like influence the game or something like that. And that's the best that you can ask for, because it's basically them doing cardio and still notching a win for the Lakers. So it's good stuff. Every time I see a game where LeBron like gets like 3 or 4 breakaway dunks just because the defense is doing really well, or they're just breaking out in transition, that's usually a good thing, because that means that LeBron's not having to do a lot of work to get some of these shots off. And so this season, I feel like our shot quality has been really high, which is much better than it was last season. And so I think that's been really good.
I mean, Diego thinks that we'll have 3 All-Stars. I don't know about that. Normally, you've got to like either lead the league or at least lead your conference with the best record. Lakers are probably going to coast most of this season. So, I mean, unless you get 3 by the fan vote, but I don't think we've got 3 players that are LeBron and AD are locks. But after that, I don't think a player like Dennis or even Trez they're popular enough to garner the fan vote. And then the media, I don't know if they're gonna. I don't know if they would pick a 3rd guy from the Lakers.
Yeah, I think the only reason why we probably wouldn't get a third guy, and this is more to the Western Conference, than it is this doesn't happen as much in the Eastern Conference, because there's a much bigger gap between like maybe the top 4 teams and
Mm-hmm.
the bottom 4 teams, whereas in the West it's really the top 8 or 10 teams minus, I guess there's just so much guard talent in the
Yeah.
West, that Dennis could be an all-star eligible player, but he won't make it off the sheer fact that guys like Chris Paul, Devin Booker,
Right.
Donovan Mitchell, James Harden, if he's still in the Western Conference, like all of those different guys, because there's so many guys here on the Western Conference, Jamal Murray, those guys, like it's very hard to make it over them, and so that's he may be at that tier, but we probably won't get it, and yeah, Rodney, like from a low key perspective, we could say that they are because we know that Dennis could kind of go off for 30 at any point. But I wouldn't quite say that they're a super team, just because if there are games where we just can't make shots, and super teams usually off the strength of just high quality defense, night in and night out, or high quality whatever it is, that can end up happening. So I wouldn't fall into the trap of thinking that, hey, we have guys that we have 4 or 5 different scores. I would think of it more like we have our 2 guys, but this season, whatever the defense gives us is whoever is going to go off, right? So they left Wes wide open last game, the Spurs deliberately, and so Wes went 6 for 6, right? And so I like to always think of the Lakers as a unit, that they're very good, and so it should be interesting to see. I actually don't think that there are any super teams in the NBA right now. I think it's like nice and balanced, just kind of how everything goes. But I will say this: the Lakers have a really solid crop of role players,
Mm-hmm.
and if you want to say 2 superstars and really get really great role players equals a super team, then I understand. But I think they're just a really, really, really good team.
I mean, Dennis is getting a lot of love in the comments, man. So shout out to Mimi, you're doing the work for us. She said she looked up Dennis's turnovers last season, and he was at 2.4 a game. I didn't realize he was only at 2.4. That's incredible for. Well, I mean, I don't. How much did he handle the ball last year with Chris Paul and with Shea Gilgeous-Alexander?
So it would depend on the game, right? So sometimes they would run OKC, like even in the playoffs, they would run lineups where his primary responsibility would just be to go in and score. So like if he had the matchup when they ran those 3 guard lineups, you would see like Chris and SGA, you'd see them sort of take the back seat in the sense that like they would just kind of play defense and move the ball around and stuff, or take wide open threes or whatever, and they would let him kind of work. And it really just depends, you know. The way I would see it is this: they actually didn't really have really great pick and roll partners for Schroder, right? Like it was like Steven Adams
Yep.
or Mike Muscala, or it would be, if they went undersized, it would be somebody smaller that was on their team. Maybe Gallinari if they played him at center or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, they didn't have an Anthony Davis or Montrezl Harrell or even a Marc Gasol, like really quality pick and roll partners. And so that's why I think things are opening up for him now a little bit more, because you have guys that can hit an open jumper. Teams just can't zone in on him when he has the ball and stuff like that. They have to worry about everybody else. And so his decision making in the pick and roll has been really good so far. His pocket passing and all that sort of stuff has been wonderful. So not much to complain about when it comes to him, but it's something that we hope that he continues to improve on. I feel like the turnovers this year have just been like him trying to like get that full court pass to Anthony Davis early, which it's not an easy pass. You have to have good synergy. There was a play, I think last game, it may have been last game or the game against Portland, where Anthony Davis set up the post spin move that he used to run with Rondo for the lob, and then I think Dennis threw it just a little bit too high, or he mistimed it. So those are all like timing and chemistry sort of things that they'll figure out in practice as it goes on.
Do you think that the Spurs will try and target Trez today, like late game, or do you think Vogel will get him out the game and run AD at the 5?
So I this is what I think. If I had to take a guess at what the Spurs are going to try and do against the Lakers, is they're going to try and attack that all forwards lineup that the Lakers had last game. So it's the one that they like to run at the start of the second quarter. So last season it was a LeBron lineup that was like LeBron, Rondo, Dwight. We didn't have Markieff at the time, so they would play Kuzma. And I want to say that the last guy may have been either Schroder, or not Schroder, it was like Caruso would usually be like the last guy. So it'd be like 2 guards, LeBron, Kuzma as a stretch 4, and then Dwight as the rim defender. And that lineup was kind of up and down depending on how they would score and stuff like that. So this season, the Lakers have run a different kind of lineup. And the lineup that they've run this season is a LeBron, Kuzma, Wes Matthews, Montrez, and Markieff lineup. So that's a lot of floor spacing. That's basically 4 shooters that you can run 5 out. I think that's the lineup that the Spurs are going to try and attack a little bit more, because that lineup has a little bit of vulnerability on the defensive rebounding standpoint, because Montrez and Markieff are smaller guys. They're not true bigs like that. There is an opportunity for that, for like a big like that. I think they have some guy by the name of Devin Eubanks. He's their center. He's like a proper 7-foot guy or something like that. There's offensive rebounding opportunities there. Sometimes if they fall asleep, there's an opportunity to get good shots and stuff like that. So I think the Spurs they won't deviate too much from what's going on, but they'll try and attack that lineup a little bit more. And I'm actually really curious to see how that lineup kind of goes on. I've been tracking some of the data and kind of I haven't pulled the tape behind what the deficiencies of that lineup is, but that is a lineup where it's very 2020, 2021 kind of centric, in the sense that like this is like the modern NBA. You got like 3 guys that are like 6'7" or taller, or 6'8" and taller, and that the entire lineup is just filled with guys like that, and they all switch everything and that sort of thing. So I'm going to be curious to watch that lineup and see how it goes. I think that's where the Spurs will try and attack. I think the Lakers are going to keep trying to do the same thing that they did last game. Get to the interior of the paint, set up wide open threes, maybe try to get Anthony Davis a little bit more loose, get him some more shots, since it'll be his 2nd or 3rd game back now from his calf thing. And I think we'll monitor what goes on. I think there was just some breaking news that Aldridge is not going to be playing this game either.
Wow.
So
is he hurt?
So that I don't know. I think it's saying that he's out because of his, let me see what Jovan said here. Left knee soreness is what they have as it relates to that. But I think if I had to take a guess, that kid that they have, Keldon Johnson, who plays like a mini Zion, basically, that guy's a problem. Like, that guy was hitting threes. He's attacking the rim, blocking shots and stuff like that. So it'll be really interesting to see. It'll be really interesting to see how, like, kind of how that lineup comes out and how aggressive they come out. Dejounte Murray scored like he was making like all of his he was making all of his mid-range jump shots and stuff like that. So I was just like, all right, like, but I don't know if he's improved on that over the offseason, but that's something that has been kind of a bugaboo for him too, to some degree. So it'll be interesting to see what sort of adjustments the Spurs make.
Vinay, you're probably tired of hearing this from me, man, but like, are we going to see AD a little more engaged today? Like, is his body language going to be a little bit better? Or do you think that, whatever injury he was dealing with, is that possibly still an issue?
I think he'll be better. He was pretty active at the beginning of last game, and then once the Lakers were like kind of comfortably in a double-digit lead the entire time, he didn't seem like he was trying, like, over pressing too hard when it came to it. If that happens again, I think that's what we're going to see. So Anthony Davis's aggression is directly tied to how aggressive he needs to be, because this is the regular season. So I think he's aggressive at the beginning of games because they need to build, obviously 0-0, they need to build a lead. And if they preserve or extend the lead, he may just kind of coast. And I think that's just something that we're going to have to kind of get used to as Laker fans, because this is a regular season, and there's really no difference between us winning by 15 and us winning by 30. So I think that's the way that they're looking at it. And I think Vogel wants to probably try to keep his minutes down and make sure that they don't have anything too crazy happening with his minutes. So I think they'll be good. I think he'll be aggressive early, and then depending on what the game situation is, if the Spurs keep it close, we'll see what sort of version of him we get.
You think we see You think we see Trez used a bit more on offense?
That lineup, so the lineup that he should be getting the most action out of is that LeBron lineup. It all depends on what the Spurs do. So last game they left West wide open, okay, and they were letting Kuzma get his cuts. Kuzma had a bunch of like nice plays where he just kind of passed it off to Wes, or Marquise swung the ball to Wes in the corner or something like that. So if uh, so if the Spurs don't adjust and they let the Lakers keep shooting wide open threes or setting each other up for wide open threes, then I don't know how involved Montrez will be because it's a good quality shot. However, if the Spurs do adjust and they start closing out on a lot of threes, that should open up opportunities for Montrez. So that lineup specifically, the all forwards lineup, that's the way I would look at it. Wait and see how the Spurs defend. And if the Spurs are very tight on their rotations and closing out a lot, we may see a lot more Montrez isolations because he should be able to overwhelm their backup Devin Eubanks. They should be able to overwhelm him in an isolation situation.
So there's an interesting conversation going on in our comments because Ali is saying that LeBron is 6th in usage right now. And should we be a bit concerned that he's that high already, given that we've got all these weapons that the Lakers were supposed to take it slow? I didn't realize he was that high. I'm going to go back and double check on that. But if he's that high, I mean, why do you think that is this early on?
Yeah. So this is one of the things where usage percentage is one of the things where it's a little misleading when you look at that number, when you try to match it up with the film. So usage for LeBron is, and so I'll give you an example, right? So LeBron's usage number is high is because he's running with a bench lineup that involves him being the first guy who creates the action for everybody else, right? Mm-hmm. So he's the guy who's bringing the ball up the court, which means that adds to his usage percentage. He's the one setting up in the post, which adds to his usage percentage. And he's always the initial passer out of some of those sequences, right? So what ends up happening is in a half-court sequence, LeBron will bring the ball up the court. He'll give it up to somebody. He'll go set up in the post. He'll get the ball back. Now his usage rate is already sky high because he's already been bringing the ball up the court and setting up in the post. But in reality, what ends up happening is once he gives the ball up, it'll go to Kuzma, it'll go to Montrez, it'll go to Markieff, and then Wes will end up getting the wide open shot, right? So in that sense, that usage number is high, but the way LeBron is actually playing isn't necessarily the usage number doesn't clearly indicate what he's actually doing. I'll give you another example, right? There may be a possession where LeBron, there's a basket at the rim or a shot at the rim by the Spurs that gets missed. LeBron goes coast to coast and gets the layup. Now his usage number for that specific possession was 100%, right? Because that entire possession he had the ball. So that usage number is always a little misleading, and you have to match it up with the film. So the way that I would always look at it is the same conversation that we've had with Anthony Davis and Dennis Schroder. When Anthony Davis and Dennis Schroder run the pick and roll, how much effort is Anthony Davis outside of the screen actually putting into getting these shots off? And if the shot quality is really good and he's not really putting in too much effort. So for example, in the fourth quarter, they ran a pick and roll. He got the ball and he did like a dribble between his legs. The guy never closed out on him until very late, and he drained a mid-range jumper, right? Like his usage rate on that possession would be like 90%, right? But in reality, that was like nothing. That's like no effort for him. So when we just look at just the usage number, we'll think to ourselves when it comes to LeBron that, man, we're using LeBron a lot. That's usually how people in analytics will use that usage rate number. They'll say, wow, his usage rate is like 35%. But if you watch the way that the Lakers are playing with LeBron, a lot of times he's just kind of chilling. You know, he's not the guy who's coming up the court, backing a guy down for 20 dribbles, and then setting up a catch and shoot situation. He was doing that last year because the Lakers had a bunch of guys that couldn't make shots that were playing next to him. But this year, he's not having to do that. We've seen that the Lakers have been like one of the best ball movement teams in the league. And the only way that happens is if everybody is touching the ball. You can't have ball movement if it's just one guy doing it. You can't say that they're a ball movement team. So I wouldn't be too concerned about LeBron's usage rate because A, his minutes are down, and B, because, I mean, to be honest, when your minutes go down, like I would imagine a guy like LeBron saying, look, I'm only playing 30 minutes. Give me the ball. Like, I'm not going to be on the floor very much. So it always comes down to when you look at the usage rate percentage, look at it based on how much he's having to do for his offense, right? Whether it's him creating a shot for himself or him creating a shot for his team. I would say the one thing that I've seen the very least amount of this season is LeBron having to be the driving kick guy. It seems like the Lakers are getting driving kicks out of everybody else as well. Dennis Schroeder's been driving and kicking. KCP's been driving and kicking. Kuzma's been driving and kicking. I think Alex Regla had a really nice thread of clips where he was showing where Kuzma would run his designed actions and he would set it up. You know, like when he doesn't have a good shot, he runs his cut, gets to the rim, and he passes it away. So usage rate is it is a good metric to kind of look at when it comes to, and this is my rule when it comes to all metrics. You don't have to follow my rule. It's just my personal. This is why I'm not as gung ho about analytics, single use analytics, as some other folks may be. Usage rate is a good way of looking to see who's the central figure that influences the offense, but it's not. It can be a little misleading when you don't attach it to some film. And so when you attach it to some film, then you'll be like, oh, okay, you know what? His usage rate is high, but he's really not having to do that very much. So it's that's the way I would look at it. And that's the way I look at all analytics in general. So LeBron is not James Hardening the offense. So that's how we know that the usage rate doesn't really involve him doing a lot of work to get his scoring and stuff off.
You explained it perfectly because everybody in the comments is agreeing with you. So that's really, really good. Because I think people were a little bit concerned that he's been playing a little bit more and he's had the ball in his hands maybe more than they anticipated. But no, you broke that down great. And we're ultimately back to a comment that people were making coming into the season, particularly when we got rid of Dwight and JaVale and brought in Mark. But we need a rim protector. And I haven't looked at the stats prior to tonight, but coming into the last game against the Spurs, we were 5th in the NBA in blocks as a team. And I would imagine most fans wouldn't know that or would think that's not what the eye test was telling them. But
sure.
What do you think, man, about this needing another rim protector? What do you think?
I was gonna say I think it is a valid thing. I think a rim protector. Not necessarily, because technically Montrez was a rim protector for the Clippers, even off the bench. But he was doing it in a help side situation, right? Mm-hmm. So what would often end up happening is when he has to protect a guy like Kawhi or Paul George, it's already very difficult to get by to either of those guys because they're good. They're really high quality defenders. So Montrez was like tag teaming guys basically at the rim and stuff like that. And that's why he was a better rim protector. With the Lakers, they don't operate necessarily the same way, right? So when Montrez is playing the backup center position for the Lakers, the guys that he's having to defend for, at least in the regular season, are guys like Kyle Kuzma, Markieff Morris, LeBron James, and Wes Matthews. Outside of Wes Matthews, those other three guys, LeBron, before anybody gets mad, LeBron is one of the best defenders in the league when he's engaged. But it's a regular season, so we know LeBron's not going to do that, and that's totally fine. I have no issue. But when we had a guy like Dwight Howard or a guy like JaVale, it was easier to cover up guys who kind of take a break every now and then, right? Like not everybody plays really crazy, like balls to the wall kind of defense, like Wes does. Wes is intense on every defensive possession, and Kuzma is a high effort guy, but he's not technically very good at keeping guys, especially when he gets matched up on a smaller guy. If Kuzma gets matched up against a CJ McCollum or Dejounte Murray, which is what happened last game, he got caught in some isolations against Dejounte Murray, and he stayed in front of him, but Dejounte still made the shots. Like when you have a rim protector of size and height, like a Dwight and stuff like that, it kind of changes the way that folks, the offensive player, may think about it. So I think that's valid. I think we need a rim protector, but the rim protector needs to be a real big. It needs to be a Marc Gasol size big. It can't be like just any sort of rim protector. So I would say if there was any transaction that I feel like maybe that sort of hurt the Lakers a little bit, it was probably losing Dwight, considering he only went for a veteran minimum and stuff like that. And obviously we don't know exactly why he went and he didn't just wait for the Lakers to possibly bring him back, because I'm sure that they would have. Or maybe they just thought they didn't have the minutes between him and Montrez and stuff like that. But I think it's something that they'll address later on. And, frankly, there's probably a good chance that as the season winds on and we start getting more into playoff rotations, Anthony Davis is going to be playing that spot. That all forwards lineup, may not necessarily have both Montrez and Markieff there. That all forwards lineup may end up having only one of those guys there, and then Anthony Davis at that center position. And so we'll see how that sort of works out in the long term and stuff like that. But it is a valid thing considering the fact that we've been giving up probably layups at the rim a little bit more than we would probably like.
I mean, Zosmar brings up Dedmon, and Zosmar, if Dedmon's available right now, I think if the Lakers thought that they needed him or they wanted him now, they would have signed him. They probably think that he'll be available later on in the season, or they're probably waiting for either a trade to come along or the buyout market. So he's probably not what they want right now. And then Mimi says what I think many of us would be thinking. Nerlens, like a Cauley Stein type, somebody young and long and bouncy. We'd love that. I don't know. Currently, I don't think that's available on the free agent market. So maybe somebody like that becomes available in the buyout, but it's hard to say right now because it's just so early. But even someone young, I don't think anyone young will become available in the buyout. We're probably looking at somebody 30 plus, right?
Yeah, and I would say that anybody that does show up on the buyout market, it's going to be something that's at mid-season. The Lakers may be comfortable with just kind of running their offense at the way that they've had. Because you have to think about it, the way you want to think about it is that whoever we get is going to be a specialist. So there's no guarantee that even in the playoffs we're going to use them outside of an emergency purpose. Right. So it's something that I think they'll figure out in the longer term. But the other thing is also we have to wait for the veteran minimum, the prorated amount, because we're a hard capped as a team. We have to wait for that number to get as small as possible, like the very last moment, which would be like the last few days of the buyout market before we actually use it. So the way I would see it is this: the recurring theme of the Lakers bench giving up layups at the rim may be something that continues on for a while, but the Lakers are okay with that because they know that getting their offense in shape and stuff like that is more of a concern. And I'll always put it back to this. Frank Vogel was asked at the end of the game, at the end of the last game, why did you finish by Jovan of The Athletic, the Lakers beat writer, why did you finish the game with Markieff and AD as opposed to whatever it was last time, which was Markieff and I think Montrez or something like that is what they finished with. He said that, and Vogel verbatim said, I know that LeBron, Markieff, and Anthony Davis is a recipe for a championship. Like, I know that 2 guards plus those 3 guys means that we'll be fine in the late game situation. And so that's why he did that. And so I think Vogel knows that. He's trying to get these guys their reps and their chemistry up in these sort of situations.
So I'm gonna bring in Gary Bell's comment because this is groundbreaking analysis right here. Stop worrying, the Lakers will kick ass. I mean,
that is, look, man, I've said it multiple times. Do not be surprised if the record is not what you guys like. If what Laker fans expect, like it's a 72 game season. I don't think that they're going to try and win 60 games. I really don't. Even when we were talking about over-unders and stuff like that, I think I said Vegas had them at like 46. I had them at like 50. I thought that just enough the offense and talent on this roster, the Lakers will finish around 49, 50 wins, maybe a little bit more than that. But they will be losing games, right? And they will be losing games because their defensive effort is not consistent. And it's a testament to a very, very strange season. And the fact that this is going to be a baseball style series. So you're going to kick some team's ass on Monday, and then you'll play them again on Wednesday, and then they're going to come back and kick your ass. And that's just the way it's going to be. That's how these baseball style series work. But the Lakers are playing for the long haul. And I know we've been saying it every single podcast or every single stream, and people are probably sick and tired of us saying it over and over again, that it's a long season, but it's the only positive affirmation that's going to be a recurring one. Like it's going to be a long season. And I think LeBron has said it very, very specifically that health is the number one concern when it comes to all this sort of stuff. So you're right. You love me. You're right. Like they may be a 1 seed, a 2 seed, a 3 seed. I don't know. We don't even know if home court's going to matter. Like in the sense that like they may play at Staples, but there may not be any fans at Staples. So like, I don't know if home court really matters like that. And so that's the sort of thing that I kind of think about. And so, it'll be frustrating. I think Lakers Twitter will be a little bit more frustrated with their lackadaisical effort. And it's just going to be a weird season, man. Like we beat Dallas by like 38, and then they go to the Clippers and then they 50 ball the Clippers, and then like we lose to the Blazers, and then the Clippers go and they like put up like a 30 ball against the Blazers. So it's just like, all right, guys, like what's going on? Clearly something weird is going on with this NBA scheduling or whatever is going on with these teams.
I mean, for some of the younger Laker fans out there, this is what it was like kind of in the early 2000s. Like the Lakers won their championship in 99, 2000. And after that, they won, I think, like 56 games, then 58 games. Like Shaq would, he would get injured and then not really work out in rehab over the summer. He'd wait for kind of closer for the season to start because Shaq believed that if you got hurt on company time, you rehabbed on company time.
Rehabbed on company time, yep.
That's how it was. And so Lakers wouldn't all, they didn't get the best record in the NBA those, some of those follow-up years. But you know what popped in my head, man, as we were talking about this, and it has nothing to do with tonight or even this season, but like, remember when Lakers Twitter, really everybody wanted Darren Collison? Remember that?
Yeah.
It feels like a lifetime ago.
He's a Clippers plant. Do not believe. You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if Darren Collison ends up in a Clipper jersey this season. I legit would. I'm telling you guys. I remember when the Lakers were talking about him and stuff like that. I was like, something's up, man. Nobody goes from like taking a religious sabbatical to like last minute being like, yeah, I'm thinking about coming back to the league. I mean, the players do it, but it's just weird for him with kind of the announcement he made, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know if he was obviously the considering what we know about the Clippers, which surprisingly that lawsuit has not been number one on the NBA news as of now, which is strange because I'm sure if the Lakers were doing cap circumvention or anything like that or bribing people to convince free agents to come here, we'd be in a lot more trouble. But I thought that I remember I posted on the timeline. So I live in the Inland Empire area of LA, so it's like 30, 40 minutes east of proper LA. I used to live in proper LA. I lived in Inglewood for like 13 years. So I understand like how the circuit and how people get to know each other.
You had to make sure everyone knew you used to live in Inglewood so they don't think you're like Paul George or something, right?
No, I have to. Look, my parents came to America when I was 2 years old, which is why I don't have an accent because I was basically raised here. What's it called? When we came here, we lived in LA County. I lived in Inglewood. I lived in Compton. I lived in Hollywood. We lived like all these different parts of LA County we used to live in. And then my parents eventually like moved to Orange County. And then they went to Texas. I went to Bay Area for like 3 years. And then we came back. And the only place to buy a house where you could spend like $500K and not get like a shanty is out here in the suburbs, basically. So I'm most definitely an LA denizen, like by original, like being raised and stuff like that. But what I was trying to say is, like, these guys all know each other, right? So on the timeline, I posted this question, right? I was just like, what are the chances that the Clippers actually paid Darren Collison to go take all these interviews with, like, like do all this stuff with the Lakers just to back out on us last minute? Because it just doesn't make sense. Like, why would you think about the Lakers as a team? Why would Jeannie Buss bring a free agent? When was the last time Jeannie Buss brought a free agent in public sight, took him to dinner, had him at a game, and then the person reneged like at the very last minute, right? Yeah. So Bentley's right. It just doesn't happen. So there was something fishy going on over there, and my conspiracy mind was like, maybe the reason why he was doing this is because he probably knows that like he's friends with like, or maybe Collison is friends. He is a former Clipper. Apparently the Clippers were interested in him. Maybe they found out that he really didn't want to come back, but they say, hey, if you lead them along, they'll waste their time with you and they won't actually address the situation that they actually have, right? We ended up getting like Dion Waiters or something like that as a backup, like ball handler. It ended up we didn't even need him because Rondo decided to become playoff Rondo, and we didn't have that problem, so it didn't even matter. But that guy was a Clipper plant, man. I refuse to believe that he was ever coming to the Lakers. Something about Steve Ballmer, man. It seems like he's kind of a sneaky guy and he'll do all this sort of stuff. And, it's so weird that Lakers Twitter was like, we got this guy. We need this guy. Even I was like, dude, he'd be great. He'd be a perfect fit for us. Everybody's writing all these articles and projections about how much better we would be. And then we didn't get him. And then we were like all afraid going to the playoffs. And then Rajon Rondo's like, nah, don't worry about it. I got it. I've just been doing around the entire regular season.
I mean, I remember, she had the steak dinner with him, whatever. And I think like that, like pictures surfaced of that. And then Didn't he sit with her for a little while at the game
Yeah.
that night as well? Like that, I don't recall her.
He was on TV.
Right.
They had him on TV. They're like, look, he's sitting next to Genie. I was just like, what is happening?
That's
This is not how we operate.
Right. I don't recall her ever. Like, when was the last time, a serious question, she ever publicly met with a free agent?
Never.
I don't recall that ever.
Never.
I've
never seen that happen.
It's not like he's like, and he's not LeBron James or like Kobe Bryant. So,
Right.
of all the free agents to meet with publicly and let that stuff all leak, not even leak, but like openly say, I want this guy, that just all seems strange.
Yeah, I'm telling you, man. I'm calling shenanigans on that situation, man. Like, there's something's not right with that. And then for him to just like dip out, like, it's just, there's no way you go that far into the conversation just to dip out last second. You would never take. Why would you show up? Why would you show up to Staples Center? That's silly, right? That seems kind of insane to do something like that. I'm telling you, he got paid to do it. That's my conspiracy theory. I don't know if it'll ever be proven. I may have to wait like 12 years, like Paul Pierce and him crapping himself in the NBA Finals to find out the truth. But I think he was paid to do it, man. It's something about it just doesn't seem right. It's I don't know. It's just weird. But I'm glad that we didn't get him because we didn't need him. And I'm glad that the Lakers kind of went in-house with the way that they kind of approach all this sort of stuff. And I'm happy that we addressed that issue, man. Like, we lost Rondo, but that still was going to be a big issue for the Lakers. Also seeing that Caruso still needs to kind of work on some of his reads. So I'm excited. I'm glad that we got Schroder in the position that we got him in. That was the first thing that Rob tackled. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually also interested to see how Talen Horton-Tucker develops. It seems like he's kind of a good fit for that role too, as well, as soon as he gets a little bit better at making his reads and clearly as once he gets better on the defensive end, because that's where he's kind of falling asleep a little bit right now.
So, like, even Talen Horton-Tucker, right? So, just things that just kind of popped in my head. So, Lakers fans, we wanted Darren Collison, and then we didn't, and then that whole thing was like a head scratcher. But then Lakers fans being upset that the Lakers let Ryan West kind of walk out the door, thinking, well, how are we going to find late round talent? And then Talen Horton-Tucker falls in our lap, and this guy looks like he might be a really good player for the next decade. Like, things just have seemed to work out well for the Lakers after like a decade of just hit after hit or miss after miss for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was warranted. I understand. Okay, there's another conspiracy theory, right? Let me, even before I get into that, there's like another conspiracy theory, right? Like, when we found out, when that news broke about the whole Clippers thing, and we're already talking way too much about the Clippers than I already want, but about the Jerry West thing and the voicemails and all that sort of stuff. And so, like, I remember I was listening to I was listening to that voicemail, and he was saying that, like, he was just like, I got word that they think that they've got Kawhi in the bag, and we really thank you for your help in recruiting him. Well, that sounds like to me that they know Kawhi's not going to LA, and he's just kind of stringing us along. That's one thing. And the other thing was, like, who told Jerry West what was going on the inside of that conversation? And then I posed that question also. And we found out that, or we didn't find anything out, but everybody was guessing that it was his son, Ryan West. And then we found out like 2 weeks later that Ryan West, and the Lakers were parting ways. And it ended up not mattering because Talen Horton-Tucker's a tremendous player, but also, like, the Buss family knows what it's doing, man. Like, the young Buss brothers, Joey, Jesse, they know what they're doing when they're managing this sort of stuff. Jeannie is hands off in the sense that, like, she lets Rob do his thing. And as much as people like to say that Clutch runs the Lakers, let me tell you something. That's not a bad thing. It's a good thing when you have a high-powered agent like Rich Paul, who represents good players, that wants to basically work in a partnership with probably the biggest brand in basketball outside of the Knicks. It's a good thing. So if people want to go around and say, well, Clutch runs the Lakers, I'm okay with that because we're winning championships. And as a Laker fan, we don't care. You know what I mean? Like, Rob Pelinka, as Pink has told us on our previous podcast, he worked for CAA at a time, and he was sending clients to the Lakers when Kobe needed help on that team. He was the one who sent Carlos Boozer and a few other guys. So sounds like history is just kind of repeating itself, and this is business as usual when it comes to that sort of stuff. And so, as Mimi said, like, CAA, Clutch, obviously I'm pro Clutch, obviously, but CAA has its fingers in the Knicks. They run the Knicks.
Yeah.
Top to bottom. So having good organizational partnerships with agents and agencies, that's just the way the NBA is going to be going in. And I would say that the Lakers are probably a step ahead of everybody else when they come to doing that sort of stuff.
The Lakers they've done really well these last few years, man. It was a brutal stretch for them with going from being a championship, contending team to Kobe getting hurt or playing with guys that just weren't good enough. The failed Chris Paul trade that we try not to talk about anymore, like it didn't happen. It was just a brutal stretch. Dr. Bus passing, all those things that just the Lakers were in a really bad place. And to see how it's taken a few years, but they've turned it around, and even working with an organization like Clutch, it is not a bad thing when you work with the best agent or best agency in the world. Like that's a good thing. When the best think about if the best agency in the world did not want to work with a franchise, how brutal that could be for that team. I mean, we saw how things got when Paul George's agent, what's his name?
Aaron Mintz.
Aaron Mintz. Because Aaron Mintz also represented D'Angelo Russell. I believe he represented Julius Randle as well, right? Paul George. There were some issues between Mintz, I think, and Rob Pelinka. Like when those agents don't like you, things can get a little interesting. So to have that relationship with Clutch, for all the memes and all the jokes out there, laugh all you want, but it's not a bad thing to have Clutch working with you, getting their guys to want to play here. And no matter what people think, Rich Paul is doing what's best for his players, for his clients. It's not he's not getting guys to come to the Lakers to benefit the Lakers. He's getting guys to come to the Lakers that benefits them, their on-court production, their on-court brands, their off-court brands, because as we all know, if you play for the Lakers, and even more so if you win as a Laker, the off-court money can be it can be through the roof.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the math behind it is just purely based on the amount of eyeballs, right? Like LA fans are very hardcore, diehard fans. And we have a big subsection of even casual fans, right? But the main thing about all the fans, whether they're hardcore diehards or whether they're casual fans, is that they buy stuff. They'll buy your jersey. They'll buy your merch. They'll buy, your Alex Caruso shirts. They'll buy Pumas to wear casually somewhere or something like that. You know what I mean? So that is the power that comes with what it is. And the number one thing that, and I think this is something that Rob Pelinka understands very astutely. And I think a lot the guys that they've brought on has kind of like understood to some degree, is that for a long time there was this shadow, right? And it's in a good way, with Kobe Bryant, that I thought a lot of players wouldn't come to LA. And famously we heard about the Dwight not coming back was because of this, because of Kobe Bryant. And it's because of a standard and an intensity that he's had, competitive intensity he's had as a player. And that's very, very, very hard to match or not challenge when you come in, right? Because when you have a fan base that adores Kobe like the way that we did, it's hard for somebody to come in there and be like, oh, how do I make my own way here?
Right.
And guys like Paul George, guys like Kawhi, I think if there was no Kobe, they would be Lakers. But the fact that LeBron was here and LeBron is the guy, and he is the guy, right? We're not just talking about a Laker player. We're talking about the greatest player of all time caliber guy. It does cast a shadow, and it takes a certain kind of person to be willing to come to the Lakers and play next to LeBron James, because it's the same thing as playing with Kobe. If you play next to Kobe, you got to win. You can't come and just be like, I'm going to put up 20 and 10 and we're going to get bounced before the Western Conference Finals. That's not what the Lakers are about. That's what the Clippers are about, because that's what their goal is, to make the Western Conference Finals. But for us, we're trying to be the winningest championship of all, or winningest franchise of all time. And that standard, look, man, the only guy that probably could have succeeded Kobe in that mode outside of after all these guys retired was going to be a guy like LeBron. There's really not, there's one or two players, three players maybe, like a Kevin Durant or something like that could have possibly filled those shoes. But outside of that, there's nobody else to fill those shoes. And so getting guys that are willing to not only play for the Lakers and the scrutiny that comes with playing for us, but also being willing to, if you've never been friends with LeBron, you don't realize he's a selfless guy. That whatever the media's built him to be, like this guy where he blames his teammates for everything, that's not what he is. And I think Rob has done a good job finding guys like that, right? Dennis doesn't seem like a guy. He's super competitive, but he seems like he genuinely gets along with everybody, right?
Yep.
Like we see the same thing with Markieff. Markieff used to be clutch. You would think that he would be in bad spirits because of
Right.
whatever happened, but he's not. Like, like that comes with kind of knowing the players and stuff like that, and knowing that when it comes to playing basketball, we're going to do it 110%. You know what I mean? This is the way that we're going to do it. And I think Anthony Davis also carries like the same demeanor that LeBron does. They're selfless guys. So look, man, people don't want clutch clients on their roster. They were going to go somewhere eventually. So, what do you want to say? Like, the best player in the world, you don't want like his agent to be part of your franchise,
Right.
and there's all this hubbub around it. Lakers said, "Look, man, we just want to win championships. If you can bring us championships, then you're welcome in this. You're welcome in this building." And that's exactly what happened. Year one of Anthony Davis and LeBron together is a championship. So I think it's a match made in heaven. I'm not gonna lie. I think Clutch and the Lakers is a match made in heaven because people hate the Lakers and people hate people hate Clutch, even though it seems like a really standout organization, like agency and stuff like that. And they're under UPA now, and so it's just it seems silly. I wonder, because I know Philly was also trying to get LeBron when he came to LA and stuff like that, and I wonder if like there are people out there like, man, maybe if we had just kind of worked together, we could have figured it out. Like, how do you think Dan Gilbert feels about like doing what he did with the second tenure of LeBron? Like, it's just, it's crazy to see how things sort of work out. And it worked out in the Lakers' favor.
I mean, Gilbert, part of me thinks he wishes he could do things better, but I don't think billionaires think that way. So He probably doesn't care one way or another. And I think you're right.
He's a revenue guy, man. He's one of the owners that strikes me as I don't really care about championships. I just need to make sure that I keep making the revenue and I get the write-offs that I want. So that's my opinion on it.
No, I do think that I think you're right. I think that LeBron was probably the perfect guy and probably the only guy that could come in after Kobe Bryant. Like, not only do you need to be not just a superstar, but you probably to follow him, you needed to be one of the all-time greats. And there's there's probably after LeBron, there's Kevin Durant, there's Steph Curry. There's a handful of guys that will go down as all-time greats. And not only do you need to be on court all-time great, but like off the court, you basically need to be a celebrity as well. And I don't think that Curry and Durant are celebrities, but LeBron, like, there's literally a handful of guys in NBA history that have reached Kobe Bryant level off-court celebrity, right? Like Magic, Jordan, LeBron. Even outside of basketball, like Tiger, Serena, like there's only Muhammad Ali, like that. That's like there's a few more, but like that's it. So to be a Laker and to be the level that they need you to be, you got to be on court productive. You need to be a superstar off the court, but then not only that, you need to be incredibly thick-skinned, because the way the media jabs you when you're a Laker, and I don't know, like someone like Kawhi, as you've mentioned before, he punches his time clock and he goes home. Like, he doesn't care. He was on Kimmel a week or two ago, and Kimmel asked him about his Twitter, and Kawhi was like, "Yeah, I don't even know who runs it. Like, I don't have a Twitter." But he has a Twitter. It's verified. He hasn't tweeted in like 6 years. So like he just goes home, right? And then like Kevin Durant, as we know, like he likes to go get in arguments and stuff on Twitter with fans, and he's right. He walks to the beat of his own drum versus how kind of a LeBron operates. Yeah. You've got to be a different kind of person, I think, to be great and particularly in LA as a Laker. And I don't know if there's many other guys. Look, man, look at Kobe, Shaq, Magic. Like even Kareem's not in the limelight the way that Magic and Kobe was, or Shaq, but like Kareem's a different guy too, but he's not like a Kawhi where he just disappears. Like Kareem is personable. He does appearances. Fans can approach him. You've got to be different when you play for the Lakers, man. And I don't know if anybody could have followed LeBron and followed Kobe other than LeBron, especially in a season where Kobe passed away. Like, I don't know who else could have done this. Yeah,
I would say that like one of the things that the Lakers always had is even if you've had, even if you've had like if you're a good basketball player for the Lakers, there is some version of personality that you have to be like with this franchise, right? Because I feel as though Laker fans, um, they try to integrate like with your personality. They want to know who you are. You know what I mean? Like as much as people hate like Kyle Kuzma, the reason why you hate Kyle Kuzma is because you know intimately or you think you know intimately what his personality is like, right? Like the girls that he likes to date, the jokes that he likes to make when he comes on Twitter. He hasn't done it recently, but like the stuff that he does, like when he talks about like stuff going on in the world and stuff like that, politics or whatever. So it's like I would say that Laker fans are very invested in like they're invested in their players the same way the players are invested within them into stuff like that. And we scrounge for any kind of small information that we can find out about even the role players that are in the league and stuff like that. So you have to have a personality when it comes to this team. And you have to be willing to like embrace the franchise. You have to embrace the fan base too as well. So you can't be standoffish, right? You can't blow games and then just dip out and go back home and then just chill out for 90 days or 71 days until the season comes back. There's still like, you know, even something simple as they win a championship, Anthony Davis orders some tacos, the guy takes a picture and Laker fans are like, oh dude, Anthony Davis must be high because he looks really high in this picture. You know what I mean? Like we draw stuff from that.
Yep.
Hardcore fan bases will draw that kind of information out. And so one of the things about Kobe is that, you know, like not and probably one of the reasons why LA came to, or maybe the world came to a complete standstill when he passed away, was because we intimately knew so much about him. You know, like obviously he had off the court stuff, issues that he had to deal with, but we knew about his wife, we knew about his daughters, we knew about his family. Kobe was open with who he was as a person, and LeBron is too, right? We see his kids, we see his daughter, we see his wife Savannah tries to stay off of stuff, but you know, like we see him engaging with his family like that, and that's very reminiscent of what Kobe used to do. When we used to find out about all the family gatherings and stuff like that. It's the reason why we love Pau Gasol, because Pau Gasol would always talk about Kobe like he's his brother and stuff like that. Same thing with Ron Artest. He only played for a couple of years for the Lakers, but he's beloved by the franchise because of his personality, because of who he was as a person. Same thing with Derek Fisher and all these other guys. And you know, I haven't given too much thought as to what happens with the NBA, right? Like what will happen in the NBA when LeBron finally retires. And I think he'll get his grand closing sort of season and stuff like that when the time comes, especially if he's in a Laker jersey, he's definitely going to get it. But I think I think Anthony Davis is learning that. I think Anthony Davis is learning what it takes to not only on the court to lead this franchise, but what it takes on this court, what it takes personality wise to lead this franchise. Because what we've learned in year one is Anthony Davis is a funny guy. He's got kind of funny personalities. We've seen with like him and Montrez sharing like random videos behind the scenes that they do funny stuff together, right? And he likes to make jokes. But when it's go time, it's go time. When you got to play serious basketball, you got to play serious basketball. And that composure, that personality, all that different stuff that sometimes we love, sometimes that we hate, that's what really makes you a Laker, that you can connect with us and stuff like that. And I'm sure it's the same thing for any other franchise that has like a franchise. Like if you ask a Warriors fan, I'm sure they extrapolate so much out of small things that Steph Curry says when he's with his wife or when he's with his daughters or stuff like that and hanging out with friends. And that's all you can ask for, right? We had Kobe from the start, and so he was our own. But LeBron came here and immediately brought that energy back, right? That we didn't have for a long time, and we were searching for it, right? We thought we would get it from D'Angelo, we thought we would get it from Lonzo, we would get it from Ingram, but you know, for a while we didn't get it. The guy that we got it from was a guy like Josh Hart, because he was a funny guy. He would do funny stuff on the court. He was into video gaming, and we learned about him. Same thing with Kuzma, right? But LeBron came in, and he's always been himself. He was himself, but he kind of carried on like what it takes to be a leader of this franchise. You have to be not only excellent on the court, but you have to embrace the fan base. And I've said it before, and I will always continue to say it. It takes a certain type of player to be willing to come to the Lakers to play. Kobe has said it, but I will take it one step further. It takes a certain type of player. There's only one type of player that can come to the Lakers, but also come to the Lakers in the vacuum of Kobe Bryant and the standard that he's kind of built for this franchise up until his retirement. So I don't think there was anybody better, man. Like I always tell you behind the scenes when we're not on air, this stuff is like cosmic, man. Like the stuff that the Laker fans are complaining about this season, it's almost cosmic, because I remember 20 years ago when the Lakers won 62 games and won their first championship. The next season they didn't look that good. They're slacking on defense, and then they went into the playoffs and then they lost like one game total or something like that, something ridiculous like that.
Lost that first game in the finals to Philly. I remember that. That's where that meme of AI stepping over what's his name comes from.
And I'm telling you, man, this season feels like it. It feels like they know what it takes to win a championship, and that this regular season is going to mislead a lot of folks into thinking that they're not as good as they were last year.
I agree. There's a couple comments I'm going to put up on the screen to your point that everything you just mentioned, Vinay. One from Robert: if players are afraid of being in the spotlight, then playing for the Lakers are not for them. He's glad LeBron and AD stepped up and came to the plate and came to LA. They sure enough did. I mean, players, everybody's not built for this. And there's a comment to kind of follow up on that from Mimi that, Paul George and Kawhi ducking the media after losses tells me that they weren't built for the Lakers. There's no way in the world you could have waited 45 minutes or an hour and let kind of like the role players come out first in LA. That wasn't going to fly if you were a Laker. And then even beyond that, I think this was a really good point. Let me see if I can find it. Right. So this is why I think overall LeBron was probably built for LA. The fact that he was the number one topic since he was in high school. I mean, so Vinay, I'm sure you remember this. Remember when he was in high school and there were rumors that his mom had gotten money to buy a Hummer or something, and he came out on national TV and had that remote control Hummer. He's been under the spotlight for so long that I think coming to Los Angeles, I think he was okay. While other players, maybe like a Paul George and Kawhi or whoever else it may be, they didn't have it. They just did not have it to come to LA specifically and play for the Lakers.
Yeah, and you have to remember, before the Anthony Davis trade, the Lakers had enough cap space for Paul George to come to the Lakers. He chose to stay in OKC. Like, he got the longer term deal and then requested a trade right afterwards. But he had a choice. So like the one guy that I don't even claim him for LA. He's not an LA guy because he's outside of LA. But he, like, that opportunity was always there. So that's why I always thought it was really strange that he would have been the second guy next to LeBron. But, I think KD said it before that, sometimes the media can be toxic around LeBron. Mm-hmm. And to some degree that may be true, right? Like the Skip Baylesses, the Brian Windhorsts, and all these guys who create these illustrious stories, the Baxter Holmes, these guys who create these stories about like stuff that's not a big deal, that they need to make a big deal, right? There was a big story that became a thing on Twitter where Rich Paul was on the Lakers plane flying back from the Brooklyn game back to LA. And that was a small excerpt in this big expose that was supposed to happen about the Lakers. And then literally, I think Rob Pelinka or somebody, Magic, came out or somebody said, yeah, Rich Paul asked us, hey, man, I have to fly back to LA anyways. Is it okay if I fly with you guys on the plane so I don't have to take a separate private jet or something? And the Lakers are like, yeah, sure. Like, we don't care. And something that was framed to be something that was like crazy drama or like, look at the privileges that an agent gets, was just like some innocuous conversation that they had with each other. And it's probably something that people have done all the time. I'm sure it's not uncommon.
But that reminds me of, I think Grant Hill and Tracy McGrady have talked about, remember when Tim Duncan almost signed with the Magic back in like 2003? Yeah. And I believe either Tracy or Grant was like, Tim asked Doc, hey, can my girlfriend fly on the team jet? And Doc said no. And one of them said they believe that ultimately led to Tim Duncan going back to San Antonio. Like, you don't tell Tim Duncan in the prime of his career, oh, your girlfriend can't fly on the team jet. Like, are you crazy? Like, imagine how that would have altered the fortune of the Magic versus the San Antonio Spurs. And you don't tell LeBron James' agent, oh, hey, it's not like, we're going to Chicago and you need to go to LA. We're both going to LA. Hey, just hop on the jet with us. Like, come on, man.
It's just you can't ignore, we've talked about it before. The human element is very, very important. Like, we have to stop talking about these guys like they're not regular human beings and they're like some robots that work under some protocol. Like, obviously, we don't know what conversation happened on the plane, but it's an innocuous thing, right? Like, it's not like he's like some random agent that's just sitting in the crowd, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that all of a sudden, like we Lakers just put him on the plane or something like that. It's a very prominent agent, but on top of that, like he was going the same direction that everybody else was going. Like so what was really going to happen? But you know, it there have been a lot of opportunities for both, again, because we're talking too much about the Clippers, but like Paul George could have came to the Lakers outright. He could have signed to the Lakers outright. Kawhi Leonard could have signed to the Lakers outright. And that's pretty much the full truth of the situation. They chose not to come here. And the Lakers won a championship. Yep. So, we're not the ones fighting an uphill battle. We're playing with house money now. And even to be honest, like, because I see a lot of times a lot of folks say stuff like, well, the Clippers are in your backyard, so these are the guys that you're most concerned about and stuff like that. We're really not. We're trying to get 18 because we want to be able to tell the Celtics fans that we really don't like that we're the winningest franchise in the NBA. We really don't care about anything else. Like, the Clippers could win a championship this year, and I wouldn't feel bad. I'd be like, congratulations. You guys did everything that you needed to do to win a championship. Good for you guys. But, like, do I think that's going to happen? I don't know. I think the Lakers have a really, really great shot. But, again, I'll tell you this. You and I both know this. When the Lakers have been good, like three-peat level good, this was the kind of stuff that we were seeing. Like, we would see the media prop up teams like the Sacramento Kings, which were a good team at the time, but they had their own warts. They had their own warts that people would ignore. There was a team like the Blazers that was a good team, but they had their own warts. But it was always about how are the Lakers going to lose a chance at the championship, and how are these other teams going to be able to do it? Before the playoffs started last year, there was literally an article that put out, here are like the 10 different ways the Lakers can lose and not win a championship this year. If you had to pay attention to the national media, you would think to yourself that there's only one team competing for a championship, the Lakers. And we're the ones who have everything to lose if we don't win. And that's just kind of how the way national media conversation goes. So I think that's going to intensify this season, because if the Lakers don't play, like, if they're not winning like 75% of their games or something like that, the media is going to be like, oh, have they taken a step back? I promise you that's exactly what people are going to write after 10 games. If the Lakers are like 6-4, people are going to be like, oh, I don't know, man. This Lakers team, man, they've got Montrez. They don't have Dwight. They're not playing defense. This is exactly the same thing that happened 20 years ago when Shaq and Kobe ripped off a three-peat. I think they have as much of good of a chance of three-peating as they do, like, assuming some of these guys stay here for the long term, three-peating as they do, like, as they did last year. So don't be fooled by their effort in the regular season. Frank Vogel, LeBron, Anthony Davis, Rob Pelinka, they all know what it takes to win a championship, and there's no confusion about that.
I remember that first three-peat, and I remember when the Lakers played the Pacers, and there were people at that point saying, Jalen Rose, was he as good as Kobe Bryant? And I mean, now it's a joke, right? I mean, Jalen Rose has become a meme because Kobe dropped 81. But like, and then I remember, the Sacramento Kings, and people thought that they were better, and Shaq famously called them the Sacramento Queens, and Rick Fox was in the stands fighting Doug Christie's wife, and like, it was nuts back then. And then the Trailblazers, and they had this really deep, really, really good team, but when it was crunch time, they melted down, and Lakers had, to me, the greatest comeback I've ever seen. I still get chills when I watch that lob from Kobe to Shaq. But I was in a subreddit the other day, and someone was asking, should the NBA try to develop rivalries? And the way I see it, you can only have a rivalry happen like on its own. It has to happen on its own. The Lakers and Celtics, they're two teams on opposite ends of the country. They met in a bunch of finals. They both have iconic players. Bird and Magic, they both, they fresh off of a college championship and then going to the two iconic franchises. Like, that's why the Lakers and Celtics are rivals. They played when the games mattered the most in the finals. And then later on, when the Lakers played teams like, the Blazers and the Kings, again, when games mattered the most. But this past season, I think when the media, and probably the NBA to a degree, tried to make it more of a Lakers and Clippers thing, I think for many Lakers fans, it really wasn't. Like, for me, I knew the Clippers were good, but like, I've never looked at them as a rival, and I don't think it's a good idea for the league or the media to try to manufacture rivalries. Like you have to play in meaningful games. That's also why, for example, like Duke and North Carolina, like they're right Chapel Hill and they're all in Raleigh. They're like a few miles apart, but like they play in meaningful games. Without the meaningful games, like Ohio State and Michigan, without that happening, there's no rivalry. You can't force that.
Yeah, it's so I have my third conspiracy theory of this stream that I'll give you because you've worked in finance and you
Yep.
understand the concept of investment and you understand the concept of making it a scalable, repeatable practice when you're investing in certain things, right? Like if you buy a bank, you got to scale it up, get it up to speed, and all that sort of stuff when it's outdated. I think what happened is that there have been two franchises that have been bought recently that are in markets, big markets, and they need to like kind of get their footprint in those markets. Okay, and those two franchises I'm talking about are the Brooklyn Nets and the LA Clippers. They're both distinctly in the same position that they are the little brothers of the team, the legacy teams that have been there. And I think the scalable strategy, and I think this is what the NBA wants. They want, and Adam Silver has talked about expansion and stuff like that, and increasing the amount of teams to offset the losses from the pandemic and all that sort of stuff. I think what happened is that Joe Tsai in Brooklyn and Steve Ballmer in LA, they may have talked to each other, or they may not have, but they came up with this strategy that this is what we're going to do. We're going to try and attract two stars, which they both did. They both got Kyrie and Durant, Kawhi and Paul George. We'll do whatever it takes to get two stars. And then what we're going to do is that we're going to astroturf the shit out of local media to make us seem like we're the best team. And we're going to put a serious investment. It's not a bad thing. These are all good things. Like we're going to put a serious investment in having a media foothold, right? We're not, the media is not going to be able to talk to us about being little brother. You have to talk to us because of our star talent. You have to talk to us about being on equal footing, right? And in the Nets case, it was successful until both those guys got hurt. You know, Kyrie obviously has had some injury issues. KD had some injury issues too as well. And in the Clippers case, we saw it would be successful. They had two stars. They built a good roster around them, and they were battling in the regular season and that sort of thing. But I think ultimately what ended up happening is we're seeing what would have happened last season with the Nets happen this season. These two guys are clear-cut superstars. They're really great. Who are the Nets? There's a new scene in town. And I think this is the conspiracy part of this comes here. I think Adam Silver is going to take this model of buy a team or start a new team, invest this much into the local media, invest this much into doing, philanthropy and promoting your star guys and all that sort of stuff, or a star caliber player, even if it's not necessarily a Kevin Durant or Kawhi Leonard type. And if you do that, you can build a successful fan base, and you can build a fan base that's willing to come and pay for those tickets and be part of the arena and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's the model that the NBA wants. That's what they want. Whoever ends up, or the guy that's bought Utah, the new guy, the Ryan Qualtrics, or the Utah Jazz have recently got sold to a tech guy. I think that what the league wants is anybody who wants to buy a team or expand on a new team and buy into the NBA, they want to give them like a scalable strategy of building a successful NBA franchise. And I think the Nets and the Clippers are two good examples of what that is. And they've been successful in the sense that they've built footholds, right? The Nets are a regular conversation. The Clippers are a regular conversation in the national media. Now the question is, can they deliver on the basketball court? And that goes to what you're talking about. You can't be rivals unless you win championships, right? So even if the Clippers knock out the Lakers, if they don't win a championship, it doesn't matter. Because in the end, to build a rivalry, the reason why Boston, LA, it's because they saw each other in the finals and they were winning championships over each other. So that's the only way it works. And for the Lakers, we're the champs. So until we're not, it's everybody else chasing us.
Here's the thing, though. So an NBA franchise in itself it's going to have a ton of value because there's only 32 of those things in the world. It's not like other businesses where you could there's an infinite number of said business. But with those, with the Nets and with the Clippers, not only are they two of the other of 32, but they're already in the two largest markets in the NBA in the world. I mean, so there's additional value there. But no matter how much money they spend on these marketing campaigns, no matter how much money they spend on getting superstar players to come to the JV teams of these particular markets, the Knicks and the Lakers, they're so intertwined, so interwoven into the fabric of the communities of both sides. Mm-hmm. I don't believe there's any amount of money that either organization can spend that's going to change the Lakers the Lakers presence in LA or the Knicks presence. The Knicks have been a dumpster fire, man, for like since what, 78, 79? I think when they last might have won a championship. And the Nets, when they had Jason Kidd, Kenyon Martin, Kerry Kittles, when they were good, the Nets still weren't more popular than the Knicks. And I know they played in Jersey at that point, but I mean, you get what I'm saying. Like, I just throwing money at it, I think is the wrong way for the league to go about it. Like but I don't know. I mean, look, both sides have superstars now. Both JV teams have, they have Kawhi, they have KD, two top 5 guys in the NBA, and maybe in Brooklyn it matters because the Knicks aren't very good. But Knicks fans have been paying top dollar to go to Madison Square Garden for like 40 years, no matter how bad they are. And this stretch while the Lakers were bad, same thing. Lakers fans didn't deviate. And when the Clippers had Lob City, that didn't change anything. So I don't, until the Lakers and Clippers meet, not one time in the playoffs or in the Western Conference Finals, but like 5, 6, 7 times. Yeah, I mean, it's going to take a generation.
Yeah, it's gotta happen more than like once or twice. Like you can't be a rivalry off the strength of just one or two things. And yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like Nets fans, they're definitely out there, and I know, but I feel like the Nets fans probably skew more towards the younger generation because they've rebranded themselves as like a brand new franchise, even though they're technically a legacy franchise themselves. But the fact that they've rebranded themselves in that manner, there's an influx of younger folks that are part of it that just don't know the history of it, right? And in regards to the Lob City thing you mentioned, there's a clip of Kobe that's been floated on Twitter also, where they asked Kobe, like, what's the more exciting team to watch? This is during the Lob City days. And, he was saying, oh, they got Chris Paul and Blake Griffin, so I would definitely go watch the Clippers. It's definitely more exciting. But, I'm more interested in watching jewelry. I'm more interested in watching hardware. And he makes that joke that there's a difference about the success of these franchises and what matters. So, we've talked like about so many different things. We talked about the pregame. We talked about LeBron's impact on this team. We've talked about like different strategies and stuff like that these teams kind of do. But like, in the end, that's all that matters. For if we were, I would say this, like if we were a franchise that had not seen any sort of championship success in decades, right? Like just getting back to the finals or something like that is worth hanging your hat off of. But for us, it just doesn't work that way. We watched the Lakers for a very, very long time. We know the standard that's set with this franchise. So there's no other way around it, man. You got to win championships. And I've said it before. I said it earlier. LeBron came to this franchise knowing that if he does not deliver a championship, the scrutiny on him will be very different than the scrutiny that he had with the Cavs or the Heat. And he delivered. That in itself, that one aspect, actively saying, I'm going to go to this franchise, which is has hardcore championship expectations, being a top player that I am, and I'm going to deliver a championship. Knowing that if he doesn't, knowing that at the time, Kobe was alive, he's following in the vacuum of Kobe Bryant. That if I don't deliver, these guys, there's a subsection of this Lakers fan base that already doesn't like me because people used to compare him to Kobe and stuff like that, or they used to put him against each other. That if I don't deliver a championship, I'm never going to be certified with the Lakers. And I've seen this conversation with a lot of people that people are like, well, is LeBron certified as a Laker? Yeah, he is. And it's not just because he came to the Lakers. He's certified because he won a championship. And he said it himself. Nobody cares about what I did before I came to this franchise. No, in this fan base, at least. This fan base only cares about what you do once you get here. And both him and Anthony Davis did it in LeBron's year 2, but in year 1 of their play together. And so they're certified. There's nothing else to talk about. You win a championship for LA and you're certified. Trevor Ariza won 1. and we're still trying to bring him back to LA because we think he can recreate whatever he did back in 2007, 2008, and those years. So, that's just the way it works with us.
Yeah, there have been people who say that, even if LeBron won a championship, which he did, that he shouldn't get his jersey up in the rafter because he hasn't played here long enough. Listen, his jersey, Pau Gasol's jersey should be in the Raptors. Hopefully it gets there. Yes. LeBron's jersey is going to be in the Raptors. And Genie and the Lakers are going to acknowledge him, not just as a Laker, but they're going to acknowledge him with his jersey in the Raptors because of what he meant to the NBA. Yes. Like he's been such a big thing for the NBA. He's going to get acknowledged that way. He led the Lakers to a championship in the most unprecedented season ever, in light of many, a generation's favorite player passing away. Like, his jersey would be up in the rafter. And he's got an opportunity to repeat. And not to get ahead of ourselves, but to repeat. And Shaq, I know Shaq says a lot of things that some people disagree with, some agree with. I think Shaq just the other day said that if LeBron either outscores Kareem on the all-time list or he ties Jordan with 6, he will, at that point, no one could argue if he's the greatest of all time. I know some people think he's already the greatest. There are people that think that he's not. But he certainly could get Kareem's record in a Lakers jersey. He could certainly win, 2 more in a Lakers jersey. And if he does either one of those things, his legacy's already set. Like, I don't think he needs to do anything else for his legacy to be what his legacy is. Everything he's doing right now is just like putting his legacy even further out of reach at this point. Yeah. But he passes Kareem
He's on his legend arc. For the folks that are new to this stream, it's something that I've talked about before, right? There's every player, I feel like when you write their story or even the lives that we live as human beings, we go through these different arcs and stuff like that in our lives. And I feel like the young LeBron was in Cleveland, his first tenure, was the guy who's kind of learning. He's the young hero trying to figure out how to help this franchise to go where he does. And then he had a heel turn, right? Like you see in like if you watch wrestling and stuff like that, there's always a heel turn where a short stretch of time, somebody becomes like this heel and you hate him. And that was LeBron in Miami, right? He wanted that championship. He was so desperate to do whatever he wanted to do that he had to go and he had to leave a city that, he considers, or not a city, Akron is a city, but leave a state that he considers his own that raised him. And he became the villain. That was Miami LeBron was the villain arc of his story. Mm-hmm. And then he comes back. The hero, the Darth Vader seeing his son and then turns around and says, I forgot that this is my son. And then, siding with the light side or whatever, he goes back to Cleveland and he completes his hero arc and he delivers a championship to Cleveland. He's certified now. 3 championships in tow and one of the greatest comebacks of all time is what he gets. And then what turns around and happens is he decides to leave Cleveland. And now he's on his legend arc. He's come to this illustrious franchise, which has been great, but for the past 5-6 years has been terrible. And obviously the biggest thing of all that hurt us is the greatest player of our franchise dying in a very tragic situation. But he delivered a championship. That is a legend arc. For as much as people say, well, it's people. I think disingenuously people do this. They go, oh, don't talk about Kobe when you talk about LeBron winning a championship, bro. Like Kobe is the Lakers. There's no way you can talk about Lakers basketball and not talk about Kobe Bryant. It's ridiculous to ask any Laker fans to do that, and to do it under the circumstances that have happened, and to lead, right? Not too many people are willing to grab that microphone and say something about Kobe Bryant. Not too many people are willing to do it, other than people who are close to him. And also, you see like the way folks treat him. People talk about him and say, well, he's just doing it because he wants to promote his own brand. It's like, no, man, he's actually friends with this guy. These guys did commercials with each other. They were in Nike meetings with each other, filming these commercials, doing voiceovers. They were on Team USA together, making jokes. Like there is when we start realizing that these are human beings and they're affected by the same thing. That's the stuff that we learn. And I can tell you from firsthand a conversation that I've had with an assistant coach on the Lakers that when Kobe's tragedy happened last season, they were already planning. They wanted to win a championship, right? That was their goal from the beginning. Mm-hmm. But in that conversation, he told me that when Kobe's tragedy happened, they stopped caring about a championship, and all they cared about was just winning for Kobe. So that whole winning for Kobe thing that everybody's been saying, that was the actual mantra. That was the motto of that team. That is the way they saw it. That's the way, like, for them, it wasn't like, oh, if we lose in the finals or if we don't win a championship, we failed as a franchise. It was about winning for him, because he is what the Lakers are. He is what me and you, who've watched 20 years, have grown up understanding and loving, and what this franchise means. So it's to do that, to complete these kind of story arcs in his life. I hope he wins a three-peat. I mean, obviously, I'm a Lakers fan. That just means he wins more. But I hope he does a three-peat. And I hope he breaks Kareem's record in a Lakers jersey. I hope he three-peats in a Lakers jersey. I hope he gets 6 as a Lakers jersey. Not because of any other reason other than the fact that I want that the narratives that people have spent, if he does it, if he three-peats, he'll be like his 20th year or something like that, 21st year in the league. Mm-hmm. That for 20 years, people have been talking and picking apart his mental state, his emotional state, his body language. People have attacked his family. People have attacked his children. People have attacked his wife. Like, he's been so much in the public sphere that I would love for him to shatter all those expectations and do it in a Lakers jersey, because he's certified now. And there's no better fan base to have on your side than Lakers fan base, because we'll ride all the way to the end for you, no matter how many Kobe stands there may be within our fan base. So that's the way I see it, man. That I think that's what's going to end up happening. That's what I'm going to try and speak into existence. A Lakers three-peat, hopefully, and LeBron, he'll get his jersey retired with us for sure.
Well, Mimi's talking statues, and I can't. The only way he's getting a statue, if I had a vote for one, is if he three-peats or something like that. I can't.
Three-peat, yeah.
The jersey and the Raptor, he can get one today, but the statue is a different thing. And I think fans should also remember that Redeem team, like LeBron, after that happened, LeBron came back kind of a different player. And I think he spoke about that. A lot of that had to do with not only him, but Dwayne Wade, like those guys getting to see Kobe up close and personal, and what he did day in and day out. Like there's the clips floating around of LeBron making fun of Kobe, tucking his jersey, his warm-ups in, and Phil calling a triangle and all that stuff. But like, those guys for the first time got to be around Kobe 24/7 and what it took to be a champion. And they came back different after that. And the heel turn, the greatest heel turn in sports history or sports entertainment, is Hulk Hogan becoming Hollywood Hogan. That is the greatest heel turn, because I was a kid when he was Hulk Hogan. When he turned Hollywood Hogan, my God.
I remember that. I remember that myself, yeah.
That was crazy. Go ahead, Vinay.
No, I was gonna say I remember I was watching The Last Dance, and there's that segment in Last Dance where they talk about Rodman showing up to WWE and wrestling.
Yep.
I was a kid. I watched that happen, and I was watching WWE, and I'll tell you what, the kid me, I was rooting for Rodman so bad. I was just like, oh man, I hope he body slams Karl Malone, and it was like a tag team match and stuff like that. It's crazy when we think about it, like what this kind of how this stuff stays with us, over time and stuff like that. And I can't say that I've watched LeBron as intimately as I've watched Kobe, because obviously he's on a different team. But I can say that I have seen a guy who gets a lot of unfounded criticism. And I thought a lot of it was unfounded just because of the nature of who he was. I get it. People are trying to make money and stuff like that off of that sort of content. But I thought it was really crazy last season as a Lakers fan to see how hard people were trying to make this team not look like a championship team. And, we got to take our victory laps after we won the championship and pull all the receipts. But that's it, man. Like, all we need is championships. And I think he knows that, and I think he's invested in that. And I think Anthony Davis is too. And I think they're upholding a standard that we expect of them. And there's nothing else that I can possibly ask for out of that guy. So, I've told you, before the season started, my energy this season is much different compared to last season. I'm not worried about a championship. I'm relaxed because I trust these guys to lead us to where we need to go.
Well, if we end up running off 3 in a row, we've talked a ton about LeBron, but the Anthony Davis all-time conversation, that's going to get really loud. Because
very loud.
I've already seen people talk about, is he better than Tim Duncan? And,
you can't put him there. Tim Duncan's
right.
Tim Duncan has a longer stretch of success. I will say that the only thing that I would say I would say the only thing that I I reflect on is imagine if a guy like LeBron or a guy like Anthony Davis had been drafted to a team like the
You
Spurs.
read my mind.
And
Literally read my mind.
yeah, and kind of how we would talk about them as players, like a very competent franchise, a
Yep.
very like they understand what it takes to win, like like a team like Miami or even a team like the Spurs. If Braun had been drafted, or a team like the Lakers at the time when Dr. Jerry Buss was alive and stuff like that,
Hmm.
like teams that understand what it takes to win a championship. There's a reason why it's always the same teams over and over and
Yeah.
over and over again. I, Certain teams know what it takes to win a championship. They identify the right leaders, the right talent, and they put the right people in place to be successful. So it's I hope the rest of the league starts looking at it that way, and figuring it out. It would be good for the parity, but until
Well,
they do, we're just going to keep winning championships.
there's very little parity in the NBA. If you want parity, go to the NFL. But in the
Yeah,
NBA, or you go to the go to baseball. But in the NBA, like I'm serious. You read my mind. Like LeBron, I was thinking about that. Like when LeBron got to Miami, he wins what 2 in 4 years, and then comes to LA. The final act of his career, and wins 1 in 2 years. Like
yeah,
just think about that. Had he been with either one of those franchises for the duration of his
hmm
career, like
yeah,
we might be talking about 6 championships already.
yeah, yeah. I agree. It's and then you also have the comparison of him to like Kobe. Like Kobe came,
Hmm.
he was drafted and traded to LA, but he stayed with a franchise that knew what it takes to win. And one of the more difficult decisions that the franchise had to make was trading away fan favorites like Eddie Jones and Eldon Campbell at the time to make more room for a guy like Kobe and Shaq,
Yep.
in terms of like the offensive strategy. They they let go of Del Harris. They went and got a championship caliber coach in Phil Jackson. They said, whatever you want. Well, we just need championships here in LA. And that's what it takes, man. Like sometimes it's not a money thing. It's this guy knows what it takes to win. This is the guy that we need. And like I said, no better person to succeed Kobe Bryant than LeBron James. One guy who knows how to win, and another guy who knows how to win. And we're hoping that last season LeBron has helped teach Anthony Davis what it takes to win basketball, and so these winning championships. So that's all we want.
Guys, I think we'll close out on that. Thank you so much for watching the stream. Make sure you subscribe to the channel on YouTube. We've talked about everything today, so this wasn't a typical pregame show. We went extremely early, but I think we had hundreds of comments. I got a notification that we had a ton of comments, so thank you guys so much. Vinay, anything you want to say to close out the stream?
No, just thankful to everybody that came in. A happy New Year's to everybody who wasn't here at the beginning of the stream. I hope you guys all had a safe and happy New Year's. I hope 2021 is healthy and successful, both emotionally, mentally, and financially for everybody. And I'm looking forward to the game tonight, and hopefully we get a win. We finished our 2020 with a win, and I hope we start 2021 with a win.
I am too. I'm looking to start off my New Year's with what is the New Year's tradition for me and crack open a bottle of Johnny Walker Gold. I've had it for like 6 years, 6 or 7 years. Hey, my wife bought it for me when we moved into this home, and I only drink it on New Year's Eve or New Year's. So I'm gonna crack that open, and then depending on how much of that I drink, that will dictate if we do a post game, everybody. So we will we'll close out on that. Again, thank you guys so much. I think it was like 150 people watching at one point, but thank you guys so much. Go ahead and follow Vinay on Twitter, follow me on Twitter, and subscribe to the show on YouTube. And we might catch you guys for a post game. So we're out. Peace.